Do you feel that there's been a balance in U.S.-Africa relations?
I would always have to say yes, because when I started, even getting a posting to Africa was not considered, a smart career move. And I started my career on the continent, and I always only bid on postings that placed me on the African continent. So I've seen a huge transition over the last 20 years in how the U.S. engages with Africa and how it sees Africa.
So Mr. Tillerson also promised U.S. support for Nigeria in rescuing the girls who were abducted from Dapchi. Would this be different from the kind of support we received when girls were abducted from Chibok?
Well, I think there were some lessons learned from Chibok for not only Nigeria, but certainly the U.S. and other partners. And I'm hoping that we'll have a lot more success than we had with the Chibok girls. And that's still a very, very delicate and sad issue. And I give credit to the movements here in Nigeria that have kept that issue alive, because it's extremely, Bring Back Our Girls has really done a terrific job. So I'm hoping that the lessons and mistakes that were made on that one from all sides, from everyone's side, don't get made with the recent abductions. And I'm hoping that through joint intelligence sharing and joint operations that they'll be able to find all of the girls if possible, and hopefully all of the girls, because my heart really goes out to their families.
In January, President Donald Trump made a comment about African countries, and a lot of people commented on that. African leaders also did. But do you think this could affect U.S.-Africa relations eventually?
Well, I think that was middle January. I believe that the alleged or reported comments, I wasn't in the room, so I can't say for sure, but I did support a letter that 78 former ambassadors from the U.S. to Africa wrote, because I did sign on. I don't usually sign on to letters, but I felt very strongly about that because, I wanted, and I think my other 77 colleagues wanted the same thing. We wanted to ensure that two things. One, that was not the perception that we portrayed about the continent that we spent most of our lives in. Number two, that the perception of African countries and their people is incorrect, if that is the perception that was shared. And more importantly, we stressed in that letter, and I believe that it was printed here in the Nigerian press, the letter. But I think that the bigger point was we wanted to raise a viewpoint within the administration that we need to take Africa seriously. And I think some of us think, and that we might have played a role in getting Tillerson here a little bit earlier, because it wasn't too long after that the president wrote to the African Union before the summit. And then in that same letter, he said that Secretary Tillerson was coming out here for his 6-country trip. So I think all of those things had a role in moving Africa from the bottom of a list of regions that might not be important to one of the regions that should be important. And I think that what I'd like to see going forward is regular engagement with hopefully the new Secretary of State coming out to Africa as soon as he possibly can. Of course, Korea is coming up first, so North Korea is coming up first, but I'm hoping that he will come out. And then I'm looking forward to whoever is going to be appointed the new Assistant Secretary of State for Africa, because right now we don't have one, and we haven't had one for several months. And I think, that's a huge diplomatic gap when you don't have that kind of leadership, because that person's role is to really put everything together and to engage with African leaders on a regular basis, to engage with their foreign ministers, and to make sure that our policies about business and trade and democracy not only get understood, but that we build the bridges so we don't have this perception misunderstanding that I think we probably have a little bit right now.
And finally, President Trump seems to, he's been vocal about his thoughts on immigration, especially immigration from Africa. from countries he does not feel are at economic par with the United States and so on. This will indeed affect the immigration of Africans, especially, who make their way to the United States, don't you think?
I read something recently where of the African immigrants that do come to the United States, Nigerian immigrants are the most engaged, the most well-educated. We have African immigrants that have now been elected to municipalities as office, as mayors as offices. So I think that in general, this perception of lack of contributions by immigrants to the United States is something that I do not understand. We are a nation built of immigrants. The president is married to an immigrant, and he's also descended from immigrants, although he may not think that way. I don't know. So I don't understand that's not the values that the nation was built on. So, I'm still in the position of, let's see what happens in terms of policy execution. Because in the end, I'm a policy wonk. I'm not a politician, and I'm not political. I want to see good policy. I want to see good relations with Africa. I want to see good policy toward Africa. I want to see humanitarian policies when we need to have it, and we need to support those. I want to see good business policies that we have. And I certainly want to ensure that we maintain the importance of good governance and democracy in our relationships with African nations and others. So let's see what policies end up being executed. Because in the end, that's the end game. It's whatever the policies end up being that really drives what the relationship is going to end up being.
Ambassador Sanders, thank you so much for speaking with us.